Imagine dedicating your life to building a future for your family. Early mornings, late nights, sacrifices big and small, all for the people you love. The years pass, and you watch the pieces of your dream come together. A warm home, laughter at the dinner table, a sense of security. It feels like everything is finally falling into place. But life has a way of unraveling the things we hold closest. For one man, what began as a minor setback became a cascade of events he could never have foreseen. The foundation he had built so carefully began to crumble, piece by piece. And when he looked to the person he trusted most to weather the storm with him, he found himself utterly alone. This is a story of love tested by hardship, of loyalty shattered, and of a betrayal so profound that it left scars not just on a marriage, but on a life. It's about how one man lost everything, not just his finances, but his very sense of trust and identity. What would you do if the person you had built your world around became the very one to tear it apart? This is his story. Let me tell you about a man named Daniel. To those who knew him, he was the kind of man you could count on. Steady, determined, and driven by a deep love for his family. For over 15 years, Daniel built his career in finance, climbing step by step to a position of respect and influence. The late nights, the skipped vacations, the missed birthdays. He told himself it was all worth it because it meant a better life for the people he loved most. Daniel was a husband and a father, married to Emily for over a decade. They had 2 children who were the center of their world, a precocious 8-year-old daughter and a curious, mischievous 5-year-old son. Together, they lived a life that seemed to embody everything Daniel had worked for. A comfortable home, family dinners filled with laughter, and plans for a future as bright as the morning sun. But what you wouldn't see in those moments was the cost of it all. Daniel's life was a series of trade-offs. Every new client he brought in, every promotion he earned, came at the expense of something else. While Emily tucked the kids into bed, Daniel was still at the office, poring over spreadsheets. While his friends met for weekend drinks, Daniel was fixing leaky faucets or balancing the family budget. He never complained. To him, this was the price of providing a life of security and comfort. And for a long time, it seemed like his sacrifices were paying off. The bills were always paid on time. Vacations, while modest, were always possible. The kids had everything they needed, and Emily never had to worry about the little things. But what Daniel didn't know, what no one could have predicted, was that the foundation he had built so carefully was far more fragile than it appeared. It began, like so many stories of loss do, with a subtle shift, almost imperceptible at first. Daniel's company, a giant in the financial world, began to feel the weight of an economic downturn. Layoffs were mentioned in hushed voices during lunch breaks, and budgets were suddenly under stricter scrutiny. Daniel reassured himself that he was safe. After all, he had been there for years, a cornerstone of the company's success. But loyalty means little when profits vanish. And one gray November morning, Daniel found himself in a cold conference room, staring at his manager across the table. The words felt distant, surreal. "We have to make some tough decisions." He walked out of that office with a severance package and 100 questions about what he would tell his family. The news hit hard, but Daniel told himself it was only temporary. He'd get back on his feet, find a new role, and everything would be fine. But as days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, the pressure began to mount. Savings dwindled faster than he expected. Bills that once felt manageable became sources of stress. And through it all, Daniel began to notice something else. A growing distance between him and Emily. It was the beginning of something far deeper, far more personal, and for Daniel, it would lead to a loss far greater than his career. In the months following his layoff, Daniel tried to keep things as normal as possible. At first, he didn't tell Emily just how bad it was. He framed it as a new opportunity, time to reflect, time to find something even better. But beneath his reassuring words, a quiet panic was growing. Every rejection email, every unanswered application added to the weight on his shoulders, and soon the cracks began to show. For a while, their savings kept them afloat, but as the months stretched on, the reality became impossible to ignore. They had to make changes. The family canceled their annual vacation, a trip the kids had been looking forward to for months. Emily started clipping coupons and looking for ways to cut corners. Daniel sold his beloved car, a symbol of years of hard work, and replaced it with an older model that stalled on cold mornings. At first, Emily tried to remain supportive. She reassured him that this was temporary, that they'd get through it together. But as the financial strain grew, so did the tension between them. It started with small things, questions about spending, concern over job prospects. But soon the conversations became arguments, each one leaving a deeper wound. Daniel, who had always prided himself on providing for his family, began to feel like a failure, and Emily, once his strongest ally, started to pull away. She stopped asking about his job search, stopped sitting with him at night to talk. The silences between them grew longer, heavier, and while the words they didn't say hurt, the ones they did say cut even deeper. It wasn't just the arguments or the silences. There was a shift in the way they looked at each other, or didn't look at each other. The warmth that once defined their marriage was slipping away, replaced by something colder, harder to name. Daniel spent his days buried in job applications, but each evening brought the same result. No callbacks, no hope. And Emily, who once held his hand in moments of doubt, began retreating into herself. The little gestures that once defined their love began to disappear. No more goodnight kisses, no more spontaneous hugs in the kitchen. Meals were eaten in silence. Conversations became logistical, about bills, schedules, and responsibilities. It was as if the financial strain had built a wall between them, one neither knew how to tear down. As the months wore on, the weight of their situation became too much to ignore. The decision was made to downsize. They sold the house, the one where their children had grown up, where every corner held a memory. Moving day was somber, the sound of packing tape and muffled tears echoing through empty rooms. For Daniel, it felt like losing a piece of himself. For Emily, it was a reminder of everything they had lost. With each step backward, Daniel's sense of failure deepened. He began to withdraw, spending more time alone, avoiding Emily's eyes, avoiding his own reflection. Emily, in turn, found solace elsewhere, whether in the company of friends, distractions on her phone, or simply by staying out of the house as much as possible. Their once strong partnership was crumbling under the weight of unmet expectations and unspoken frustrations. Neither of them would say it out loud, but the love they had once fought so hard to protect was slipping away. The financial crisis that had upended their lives was no longer just a problem to solve. It had become the fault line in their marriage. And as the distance between them grew, something else was beginning to take its place. Something Daniel couldn't yet see, but would soon discover. It wasn't one thing, it was many little things. The late nights that turned into early mornings, the unexplained absences, the quiet moments when Emily would glance at her phone and her expression would change. Daniel noticed, but he told himself not to overthink it. After all, they were under a lot of stress. People cope in different ways, right? But the signs were there. The nights when Emily said she was meeting friends but came home hours later, smelling of perfume and something else Daniel couldn't place. The way she started dressing differently, paying more attention to her appearance when she left the house. And the biggest change of all, the distance between them that had once been emotional now felt physical, tangible. For a while, Daniel convinced himself it was all in his head. But doubt is a seed that doesn't need much to grow. One evening, as Emily stepped out to run errands, Daniel noticed she'd left her laptop open on the kitchen counter. He hesitated. Invading her privacy wasn't something he would ever do. But something stopped him from walking away. The message was short, but it said everything. Can't wait to see you again. Last night was amazing. The sender's name was unfamiliar, but the words hit him like a punch to the chest. He read it again, hoping he'd misunderstood, but there was no misreading. His heart raced as a wave of nausea rolled over him. This was it, the confirmation of something he had been too afraid to admit. Waited for her that night, sitting in the dimly lit living room. When Emily walked through the door, her carefree demeanor faltered the moment she saw him. She knew, and so did he. The confrontation was raw, explosive, filled with every emotion Daniel had tried to bury. He demanded answers, his voice cracking under the weight of betrayal. Emily tried to deny it at first, but the evidence was undeniable. Slowly, the truth came out. The other man was someone she'd met through a friend, casual at first, but it had grown into something more. She didn't know how to explain it. I didn't mean for this to happen, she said, tears streaming down her face. But the damage was done. For Daniel, the pain was more than he could bear. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the humiliation, the sense of failure. He had given everything to his family, sacrificed his own happiness for theirs, only to be left with this. In that moment, he felt stripped of everything: his pride, his love, his sense of self-worth. The betrayal wasn't just about Emily's actions, it was about the life they had built together, the memories, the promises, the plans for the future. All of it felt like a lie now, and while Emily begged for forgiveness, Daniel couldn't see a way forward. How do you rebuild trust when the foundation is shattered? In that moment, Daniel wasn't just a husband confronting his wife's infidelity. He was a man confronting the end of everything he thought he knew. And the question that lingered in the air between them, unanswered, was this: what happens now? For days after the confrontation, the house was silent. The kind of silence that wasn't just an absence of noise, it was heavy, suffocating. Emily moved through the rooms like a shadow, avoiding Daniel's gaze. And Daniel found himself retreating into a world of his own pain, tried to function, to focus on the practicalities. There were bills to pay, a family to support, but every task, every decision felt insurmountable. The weight of financial ruin and betrayal pressed down on him, robbing him of the energy to fight back. Even the smallest moments, hearing Emily laugh on the phone, seeing her go out, were a reminder of the life he thought they'd shared, a life now gone. It wasn't just Emily who seemed distant. Friends and family, once a source of comfort, now felt like strangers. Some offered quiet support, but others distanced themselves, uncomfortable with the messiness of it all. Whispers of blame began to surface. Maybe if Daniel hadn't lost his job, maybe if he had been more present. Even those who didn't voice their thoughts outright seemed to pull away. Invitations dried up, conversations became polite but shallow, and Daniel, once the man everyone admired, found himself standing alone in the middle of a storm he couldn't escape. But the worst part wasn't the isolation. It was the memories. Every quiet moment became a battlefield of flashbacks. The laughter in their old home, the vacations they took, the nights spent dreaming about the future. Now, those memories felt like cruel reminders of what he'd lost. At night, when the house was quiet and his mind refused to rest, Daniel replayed every argument, every moment he could have done things differently. Was it my fault, he asked himself over and over? If I hadn't lost my job, if I'd been a better husband, would things have turned out the same? A few friends stuck by him. They'd invite him out, check in with him, offer words of encouragement. But even their kindness felt hollow, unable to reach the parts of him that hurt the most. "You'll get through this," they'd say. But how do you get through something when you can't even see the way forward? Others were less subtle. "You need to move on," one said, their tone impatient. Another suggested he focus on rebuilding his finances, as if money could fix a broken heart. And then there were those who simply disappeared, unable or unwilling to deal with the discomfort of his pain. As weeks turned into months, Daniel felt himself unraveling. He stopped answering calls, stopped trying to explain what he was going through. The once proud man who had built a life from nothing now struggled to get out of bed. Each morning felt like a reminder of his failures, his failure as a provider, a husband, a man. One night, as he sat alone in the house that no longer felt like home, Daniel found himself staring at an old photo album. Page after page, he saw the life he had worked so hard to create. And with every picture, the weight of his grief became unbearable. This wasn't just about Emily or the other man. This was about everything. His dreams, his identity, his hope for the future, all slipping through his fingers. Rock bottom, they say, is where you start to rebuild. But for Daniel, it felt like the end. Alone with his thoughts, with no one to turn to, he wondered if there was anything left to salvage, or if this was where his story ended. Rock bottom is where many stories end, but for Daniel, it was where his began again. It didn't happen overnight. The path to rebuilding was long, painful, and often uncertain. But it was a path he chose to walk. The first step was finding a job. It wasn't easy. His confidence was shattered, and rejection after rejection tested his resolve. But Daniel didn't give up. Eventually, he landed a position, not as prestigious as his previous role, but it was a start. With every paycheck, he felt a little more like himself again. Therapy became his lifeline. Sitting across from someone who listened without judgment allowed him to unpack the pain he'd carried for so long. He began to understand that the betrayal wasn't his fault. It was a choice someone else made, one that reflected their actions, not his worth. Support also came from unexpected places. An old friend, hearing of his struggles, reached out. They'd meet for coffee, talk about everything and nothing, and slowly, Daniel realized he wasn't alone. People cared. He just needed to let them in. Through it all, Daniel learned some hard truths. Financial stability, while important, wasn't a substitute for emotional connection. He had been so focused on providing for his family that he'd forgotten to nurture the bonds that truly mattered. And betrayal? It didn't destroy those bonds. It revealed the fractures that had been there all along. He also discovered resilience he didn't know he had, the ability to start over, to rebuild, to find purpose again. Daniel learned to forgive, not to excuse what had happened, but to free himself from the anger that had weighed him down for so long. Now, Daniel stands as a testament to the power of starting over. His story isn't just about loss, it's about growth. It's about finding strength in the face of unimaginable pain and learning that sometimes the worst moments in life are the ones that teach us the most. What would you do if faced with such a betrayal? Would you walk away? Would you fight to rebuild? Or would you find a new path altogether? Let us know in the comments below. Your stories matter, and they might just inspire someone else to keep going. Because if there's one thing Daniel's journey has shown us, it's this: life doesn't end with heartbreak. It begins again, one step at a time. If you found Daniel's journey moving, or if his story resonated with your own experiences, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Here we explore the untold stories of love, heartbreak, and resilience. Stories that remind us of the strength we carry, even in our darkest times. Hit that subscribe button and join a community where every story matters. And if you'd like to hear more, turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Together, we can find hope, healing, and inspiration in the stories that connect us all.